is all year. So when I'm sad and down, usually around my birthday and Christmas time,
Hmm.
I can be peace. And
Yeah.
during my birthday is the summer, outdoors, I can look around at whatever flowers I'm growing, whatever herbs I'm growing, whatever things I have on the patio, and use those, and then talk to other people about them and get some joy out of it. So
Yeah.
they all bring me, and the outdoor ones, seeds from them. I can be like, here's some seeds. Here's some cabbage collars. Take them. Here's a couple
Yeah.
of things. I got them. Like it's something that's beautiful to me to be able to do. Um, and how they can bring me joy. So I definitively connect with my plant. They
Yeah.
my children. But when it comes to in a seriousness, there's people who can say like Derek, you got me into doing something with plants because you gave me my first plant. Now I don't remember
Yeah.
what I gave them. There's some people like you remember that plant you gave me. I don't
Right.
ever giving you a plant, but because of who I am, and I'm very giving and I love plants, I'm pretty sure I gave you a plant. I'm pretty sure I bought you one, right? And it's some
Right.
way, shape, or form. So for me, it's literally me saying, I love this thing so much. Let me show you this thing I love, right? These things are so cool to me. These plants are so cool to me. Let me show you this. And whether it's a plant, some people they'll never take a plant from me. So I'll be like, okay, I'll make you an infused honey with some random herb, right?
Yeah.
They don't take that and they made like a kombucha. I make kombuchas and sodas. I have SCOBY.
Yes. Yes. I see this. I mean, you fermented and everything,
I do. I got them. I got some things on the counter right now. There's people who
and
want
they'll
that.
explode. Could be
They
obviously. And
will. I was showing somebody last night these drinks, and I had to put some in the refrigerator because I've had one literally explode. Like I took the top off. It was hot in here. But I used to leave the AC off when I would go to work to save money. And the heat makes the yeast, and be more active. The carbon, the oxide is pressure is wanting to expand out because it is hot. So between like
hmm
and biology, it's just all working together make this thing like a ticking time bomb. So I opened it and it was like this gun. Like if you think of a gunshot, if you somebody shot a gun near your head, that's what it sounded like. And the soda exploded all up the counters, all up the cabinets, and touched the ceiling. It was the craziest thing in the world. And I was so like, wow, that's so amazing until I realized
yeah.
who cleaned this up, Derek? It's me. Like, all up.
Essentially, what's in it?
So it's depends on what
It's
tea.
a fermenting process.
Yeah, it's a fermenting process. So the ferment is the base is somebody's
Yeah.
tea, right? So if I'm making a ginger beer, it's a heavy ginger extraction. I do a lot of ginger. I boil it down, some sugar. Sometimes I use some brown sugar. I'm not going to tell you the rest of the stuff I use because my secret recipe is
Right.
delicious.
Right. Right.
Okay, the rest of y'all, when I do a Patreon and I do a recipe, then you'll learn, right?
We'll
But
get the 6 pack, or you'll just start selling it.
look, I did at one point, but again, I was just
Yeah.
like, I'd rather show people how to make it and have a good time. Maybe one day in the future, I'll be like, here's my recipe. Somebody make this, and then I get money.
Right.
But do all of that, and I add the thing that's going to really kick off the fermentation. And again, fermentation, composting, it's all the same. I want to control this process to say, this is what I want it to happen. I want it to decompose in my way and not rot. I don't want this to spoil. I don't want this to mildew. I want this to ferment. I want this to compost, right? And bokashi is a compost technique, but it's also a fermentation technique. So when it comes to the drinks, I add the SCOBY, the symbiotic cultures of bacteria and yeast, for
Mm-hmm.
a kombucha, right? Add that in, add the bits in or whatever, add the juice in or whatever was going on with that. With the ginger beer, the ginger bug, I add that in. The ginger bug is basically a cultivation of yeast, right? And then some ginger parts, or I add that in. I add into my bottle, open up the bottle, and over time I'll see the bubbles forming. I'll see the fizz forming. So, and I reach without knocking everything off.
It's so interesting, Derek, because like, how long does this process take?
So depends on how much of a starter they call it. So the ginger bug,
Mm-hmm.
the SCOBY, whatever, depends on how much of that you added in there, how active that was, and the
Yeah.
temperature of your house, and then like the actual recipe. So like if when I add everything in, and I'm doing video series on this, I try to make sure everything is like cool enough because if I add like my starter to boiling hot water, it's gonna kill. It's an organism that's living. I don't want to do that.
Right. Yeah.
My house, even though I keep it around 74, 73 in here, to a lot of people, they're like, that's so hot. It's actually colder than you think.
Right.
Um, and during the winter months, I keep it cooler. But during the summer, especially, I can get to what I expect is a good ferment in a day or two. And there's one
Really.
I have in the refrigerator that a drink was already foaming and bubbling in a day. It just literally was like boom. I think I split like a half and half mix. The next day was like pow, right? So it was like,
And
oh,
it's like a fizzy, like when you drink it, it's like a fizzy soda.
it is, it is. I'm gonna have to open the refrigerator because I want the people to see this. Dang it! I want the people to see
I want to see too.
because I have a video where I show it. Let's see, because I have a bunch of them out, and hopefully they'll do it. So this one's a good example. So on the side here of this bottle, this was a pineapple and various herb drink. Again, I can't tell you all my secrets. You
Right,
could
right,
see
right.
the yeast that was left over on the bottom. That's what all that little gunk is, the dead yeast, some of the active yeast. So I'm going to mix this up a little bit so it's not looking as disgusting. Okay, there we go. And we do see some foam. We do see some fizz. This isn't just for
Yeah.
me shaking.
Yeah, totally.
And there was a little.
Oh, I heard it.
When you play
For
that back,
sure.
you're gonna see. And again, it has that foamy fizziness. Now for pineapple, for me, when it's a fruit flavor, fruit
Mm-hmm.
when you're fermenting, depending on if you're using like a ginger bug or a kombucha or whatever, fruit flavors for me are they go into a way I don't want them to be because they taste like what I relate to beer or wine.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really like that in a drink. I like the initial start, but not where it goes. And then that one was barely audible, but again, they're in the refrigerator, so they calms them down. But if I
Yeah.
leave these out for a couple hours and they get back to room temperature, pow, bang,
It's
sis.
so
This
interesting.
one especially likes to foam over. They're like children; they have different personalities.
It's so interesting. How long have you been doing this? Like
Ooh.
making the kombucha?
The ferments in general, I have been doing. I've technically been fermenting since I was a child because I used to mix stuff together and ferment in bottles.
I love that.
Play around with it. I didn't know what it was at the time,
Right,
but
right.
when I came back to it, it's crazy how this happened. I've been some crazy plant kid my whole life. When I came back to it, it would have been 20. I was still living with the ex, so it would have been 2014 maybe. So 10 years. And if I trace a Snapchat video back far enough, I can find videos where I really started experimenting with different herbs, different juices on a deeper level because I did it on and off since really I was a teen, like different teas and
Wow.
but making ferments like
Yeah.
this since 20, I want to say maybe even 20. I might have started doing kombuchas in 20. Actually, I probably did them in the X house. Yeah, 2014, 2013.
That's
Um,
so cool.
so,
Yeah,
yeah.
my husband loves these fermenting videos of like the Chinese vegetables that are like 200 years fermenting, and I'm like, they're like generations of like, and I'm like, oh my god, I don't know if I could. And he's like, seriously, if we were there and could try it, like you, he's like, I think this is so amazing, like we should do this, and I'm like,
So,
uh,
so when you're thinking of like any beer, and I need this Budweiser in town, I need to figure out how to contact them and learn about them and some of the. I should probably do it with the local beer making people, like these local beer making processes, and really see like what are you doing. But I feel like they're doing like what I do on a
yeah,
large scale, where they're using that yeast from other ferments and are mixing it in. Right? I'm
yeah,
using this drink is so foamy. This one here because I took this isn't the one that's still warm. I took this one that was the problem child, okay, redheaded, doing all types of stuff. It's a reference to a movie. 90s kids will get it. That was a problem child. I added that in and I got that yeast stuff. All of those came from a ferment that I had growing scobies that I started several months ago. And I got the scobies nice and big and I started doling it out and mixing and doing different teas until I started to get to this place of, okay, it doesn't really taste like vinegar anymore. It's tasting better. Let's keep it going. And now I have all these different bottles, and I'm like, Dexter's Lab, just pouring and mixing and mixing.
Textures
Pour.
lab.
I'm
Derek.
so it's where if you try it, you can't think of, oh my God, I want to get a 200-year-old piece of vegetable.
Yeah.
Technically, they all of that stuff would have been taken out. But over time, that same yeast is a descendant, an ancestor, just like we are of people, of
Yeah.
somebody was using 200, 300 years ago.
Yeah. Talking about ancestry and like changing the world, really. Today, I just really dug deep into George Washington Clark and his legacy and who he was. I asked my husband, I was like, do you know? And he's like, of course, the peanut guy. And I was like, he was so much more than the peanut guy. Like, he had a statue, like, presented in his park, the name of his namesake.
Yes,
The only, I mean, not only the first black person, first black male to ever, but only presidents had the statue before. Like, I just love that he inspires you so much. Can I just ask you like what his legacy means to you and the things that you're doing? Like, he changed the landscape of agriculture to say like, no, we cannot deplete the soil anymore. Generations and generations of just depleting the soil. Like, let's change it up and grow peanuts and sweet potatoes. I mean, but it was so much bigger than that. Like, he really, like, he was a scientist and knew what he was doing, and it's phenomenal. And that's why he's so beloved and honored, not just in the industry but just in the world, because he's a phenomenal man. But
he is. That's a very big question. I think for me, him to start off, there exists so many unsung heroes of Black science, Black STEM, that they may have did something that was magnificent and a white person got attributed for it. They may have not done anything that was significant that made history. Some did do something significant, made history, and their names are out there if you search hard enough. And of course, there are those of the historic ancestry who, pre and post the American slave trade, were doing something great and were somebody's scientist in some way, shape, or form. When it comes to those people, and as I've been lightly going deeper into different cultural, botanical, and horticultural life lessons, knowledge, science, and all of that jazz that actually are like, wow, like this relates to a culture, this actually has some scientific backing, blah, 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 blah. I've become inspired because it shows that and really showcases a difference than what we see. When
yeah,
people envision a botanist, even with George Washington Carver, right, they don't see him. They see anyone else. Some people may name Gregor Mendel, right? The pea guy, the one that was talking about the Punnett squares. They may reference Linnaeus. They may reference, there's a German one I can't remember the name of right now, but they may reference a series of white people, or they may just have in their mind a white man in a lab coat. And when I come around, not being dry by any personality standards whatsoever, I'm 6'2". I have these beautiful sexy locks, this gorgeous chocolate skin. They are forced to confront their own personal biases, right? And I can generally see from their reaction what kind of person they are, because some people are so they don't understand that I read it that quick, but
right.
I clock it when they're like, "So you're a botanist, like for real, like a botanist, like a real botanist, a whole botanist," and now they want to know my academic transcript. So it's something where a George Washington Carver, when I dove deep into his life and his story some years ago, he inspires me by using what he had to get what he needed. He was a professor at I believe, the Tuskegee College. Especially in those times, Black folks were not getting the appropriate resources that were equal or equitable even to their white counterparts in academic standards.